In the vast silence of the Painted Rock Desert, some say you can still hear them. The whispers of those who came before, carried on winds that have sculpted stone for millennia. What secrets does the desert keep beneath its scorched surface? What ancient powers lie dormant in the blood of those marked by strange red patterns passed down through generations? When 8-year-old Eli Rodriguez is abandoned in the merciless desert by the man he trusted, death seems certain. But the desert has other plans. A Mustang appears, impossibly miraculously, with a crescent scar gleaming on its shoulder. Spirit, they call him. Not quite wild, not quite tame. A guardian of bloodlines older than memory. Some bonds transcend understanding. Some gifts come with terrible burdens. And some journeys begin when all hope seems lost. This is a tale of water hidden in stone, of horses that appear when death is near, and of a boy who discovers that his greatest weakness may be his most powerful gift. Listen now to the desert's call. The desert remembers. Long after footprints fade and wind erases all traces of human passage, the desert holds its secrets in layers of sand and stone. Some say if you listen carefully during the quiet hours, between dusk and dawn, you can hear the whispers of those who walked there before. In the Painted Rock Desert of Arizona, those whispers ran especially deep. 1973, Quang Tri Province, Vietnam. The jungle pressed in from all sides, a suffocating green wall, alive with the sounds of insects and distant artillery. Private James Rodriguez crawled through the undergrowth, each movement sending fresh waves of agony through his shattered leg. Blood soaked through his makeshift bandage, leaving a crimson trail behind him. "Keep moving," he whispered to himself, teeth clenched against the pain. "Just keep moving." His unit had been ambushed at dawn. The firefight lasted minutes, but when the smoke cleared, James found himself alone, separated from his squad, and bleeding badly. Radio damage. No way to call for extraction. The enemy was still out there searching. Night fell with terrifying swiftness. James dragged himself into the hollow of a massive fallen tree, his strength fading with each labored breath. Fever set in, painting the world in wavering brushstrokes of delirium. He thought of home, the vast Arizona skies, his mother's fry bread, the stories his Apache grandfather told about the desert spirits. "I don't want to die here," he murmured, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Not in this place so far from home." The sound came first, a soft nickering that seemed impossible in this jungle hell. James forced his eyes open, certain his mind was playing tricks on him. There, standing in a shaft of moonlight that broke through the canopy, was a horse. Not the small, sturdy Vietnamese ponies he'd occasionally glimpsed in villages, but a tall, proud animal with intelligent eyes that seemed to pierce straight through him. Its coat gleamed almost silver in the moonlight. "Impossible," James whispered. The horse approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of blood. It nudged James's shoulder, then turned and took a few steps away before looking back expectantly. Delirious with fever, James reached up and grasped the horse's mane. With excruciating effort, he pulled himself onto the animal's back, nearly blacking out from the pain. The horse began to move with careful steps, somehow finding paths through the dense jungle that James couldn't see. Hours passed in a haze. The steady rhythm of the horse's gait became the only constant in a world spinning with fever and pain. James drifted in and out of consciousness, his hands tangled in the horse's mane. When he opened his eyes again, he was at the edge of a clearing. Figures in American uniforms rushed toward him, shouting words he couldn't understand. As hands pulled him from the horse's back, James turned to look at his savior one last time. But the horse was gone, vanished back into the jungle like a ghost. "Rodriguez is alive!" someone shouted. "Get a medic now." "How the hell did you get here?" asked a sergeant, disbelief written across his face. James could only whisper before darkness took him. "The horse, the spirit horse, found me." In 2025, Painted Rock Desert, Arizona. The sun bore down with merciless intensity on the small gathering assembled beside the granite headstone. The marker was simple, etched with the words, "Daniel Rodriguez, beloved father, son, and guardian of the desert, 1975-2020. A man in his mid-40s stood before the grave, his weathered face a map of grief, still fresh after 5 years. Victor de la Cruz removed his hat, revealing hair prematurely streaked with gray. His military bearing remained evident in his straight posture, despite the emotional weight clearly pressing down on his shoulders. "You were right, old friend," Victor said softly. "They've come back for us after all these years." He placed a small metal object on top of the headstone, a battered compass with a distinctive scratch across its face. "I promised I'd take care of them," he continued, voice dropping to a near whisper. "But I don't know if I'm strong enough to do what needs to be done." A few yards away, Maya Rodriguez watched her husband with eyes that held both love and concern. At 39, her beauty remained striking, high cheekbones, betraying her mixed Spanish and Apache heritage. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The white coat she wore over simple jeans and a blouse identified her professional role as clearly as the stethoscope around her neck. Beside her stood Eli, their 8-year-old son. The boy's resemblance to his father was unmistakable, the same thoughtful eyes and serious expression. But today those eyes were fixed not on his father's grave, but on the distant horizon where heat waves danced above the red rocks. Maya placed a gentle hand on her son's shoulder. "Are you feeling all right, mijo?" Eli nodded, though the slight tremor in his hands and the faint reddish marks visible on his wrists told a different story. "I'm okay, Mom. Just a little tired." Maya frowned, slightly professional concern mingling with maternal worry. She checked his medication that morning, made sure he'd taken it with breakfast. The symptoms shouldn't be flaring up again so soon. "We'll head home in a minute," she promised. "You can rest there." Eli didn't answer. His attention had shifted to something on the periphery of the cemetery, a flash of movement among the distant rocks. For a moment he thought he saw the outline of a horse dark against the red stone watching them. When he blinked, it was gone. The drive home passed in contemplative silence. Their house sat on the outskirts of Copper Canyon, a small town that existed primarily to serve the nearby ranches and the occasional tourists drawn to the desert's stark beauty. The Rodriguez home was modest but welcoming, a single-story adobe structure with a wraparound porch and a small barn behind it. Once it had housed Daniel's research equipment. Now it stood mostly empty except for Maya's veterinary supplies and the solitary occupant in the corral beside it. As their truck pulled into the driveway, Victor spoke for the first time since leaving the cemetery. "I've got to head to the garage. Johnson's pickup needs work before tomorrow." Maya nodded, hiding her disappointment. These anniversaries were hard on all of them, but Victor seemed to retreat further into himself with each passing year. "Will you be home for dinner?" "I'll try," he said, but they both knew what that meant. As Maya and Eli entered the house, the boy immediately went to the window that faced the corral. There, standing motionless in the afternoon sun, was Spirit, the Mustang that had belonged to Daniel Rodriguez. The horse was magnificent, even in repose, coat the color of midnight with a distinctive crescent-shaped scar on his left shoulder. He had been wild once, at part of the free-roaming herds that still wandered the most remote parts of the desert. "Can I go see Spirit?" Eli asked, already reaching for the door. Maya hesitated. "Only for a little while. It's hot out there and you need to rest." Eli was already out the door before she finished speaking. Maya watched through the window as her son approached the corral. Spirit, who normally kept his distance from everyone, except occasionally, Maya lifted his head at the boy's approach. The horse's ears swiveled forward with interest. Maya turned away from the window and moved to Daniel's study, a room she'd preserved almost exactly as he'd left it 5 years ago. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the half-closed blinds, illuminating walls covered with maps of the desert and shelves filled with books on Apache culture, desert ecology, and medical research. She went to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Inside was a leather journal, Daniel's private research notes that she'd only discovered after his death. She'd read it dozens of times, trying to make sense of his theories about the strange condition that had affected his father James himself, and now their son Eli. The Rodriguez syndrome. Daniel had named it in his private notes, though no medical journal had ever acknowledged such a condition existed. The symptoms were distinctive periodic flare-ups of joint pain, distinctive reddish markings on the skin that appeared and disappeared in cycles, elevated body temperature, and occasional episodes of what Daniel had described as heightened awareness. Maya ran her fingers over her husband's handwriting. The last entry, dated just days before his final rescue mission, was what troubled her most. "I believe I've found it, the plant described in grandfather's stories. If I'm right, it could change everything we know about our condition. The military research group has been monitoring my communications. I need to retrieve a specimen before they realize what I've discovered. This could be the key not just for us, but for Eli's future. He never returned from that mission. The official report cited a sudden sandstorm disorientation and exposure as the cause of death, but Maya had always suspected there was more to the story than she'd been told. A knock at the front door pulled her from her thoughts. She quickly returned the journal to its drawer and locked it. Dr. Helen Chen Ely, specialist from Phoenix, stood on the porch, her expression professionally neutral. I hope I'm not interrupting anything, Maya. I was in the area for a conference and thought I'd stop by to discuss Eli's latest test results in person. Maya led her to the kitchen, putting on a pot of coffee, more to occupy her hands than because either of them wanted it. You could have just called, she said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Helen's unexpected visits rarely brought good news. Helen placed a folder on the table between them. The hospital board has made a decision regarding Eli's experimental treatment program. Maya's hand stilled on the coffee pot. And they're discontinuing it, Helen said, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine regret. I fought for it, Maya, but they're insistent that the resources be redirected to more promising research avenues. More profitable, you mean? Maya said bitterly. Because a condition that affects only a handful of people isn't worth the investment. Helen didn't deny it. I've brought all of Eli's files. I thought you might want them for a second opinion elsewhere. She hesitated, then added, there are some research facilities that might be interested private organizations with different funding priorities. You mean like Horizon Biotech? Maya asked, naming the military-affiliated research company that had approached them shortly after Daniel's death. They're not interested in curing Eli. They just want to study him like a lab specimen. Helen looked uncomfortable. They're not the only private research group out there. Outside, a whiny from Spirit drew Maya's attention to the window. Eli was in the corral now, standing close to the Mustang. The boy reached up and placed his small hand on Spirit's neck, and the horse lowered his head as if in acknowledgement. Did you know that Spirit found my husband's body? Maya said suddenly. The rescue team had given up after 3 days. Then this horse, who was supposed to be safely in his corral, somehow got out and led them straight to Daniel, 10 miles into the desert. She turned back to Helen. How do you explain that scientifically? Helen gathered her papers. I don't try to. I just want what's best for Eli. She stood to leave. The current prescription should last another month. After that, she trailed off, leaving the implications clear. After Helen left, Maya returned to the window. Eli was sitting in the shade of the corral fence, now sketching in the notebook he carried everywhere. Spirit grazed nearby, occasionally lifting his head to look at the boy as if checking on him. Maya was so absorbed in watching them that she didn't hear Victor enter until he spoke from behind her. Helen Chen was here. Maya turned surprised. I thought you were at the garage. Johnson canceled. Victor's eyes were fixed on Eli and Spirit. What did the doctor want? The hospital is cutting Eli's treatment program, Maya said, watching his reaction carefully. They don't think it's worth the resources. Something flickered across Victor's face, concern, but also something else. Relief, resignation. Maybe it's for the best, he said finally. Those treatments drain our savings and they barely help. We can't keep doing this forever, Maya. He's 8 years old, Victor. We can't just give up. I'm not saying give up, Victor said, an edge entering his voice. But maybe we need to consider alternatives. Horizon Biotech has been reaching out again. They've increased their offer. Maya stared at him. You've been talking to them behind my back. Victor's jaw tightened. Someone has to think about the practical realities. Daniel left you with a mountain of medical debt, and my garage barely covers the mortgage, let alone Eli's treatments. Don't you dare blame Daniel for this, Maya said, her voice dangerously quiet. He was looking for answers until the day he died. And what good did it do him? Victor snapped. He chased myths and legends while his son got sicker, and now you're doing the same thing with your traditional medicine research that no reputable journal will publish. The argument might have escalated further, if not for the sound of the door opening. Eli stood there, his sketchbook clutched to his chest, eyes wide as he looked between them. I'm sorry, he said in a small voice. I didn't mean to interrupt. Maya immediately moved to him, her expression softening. You didn't interrupt anything, mijo. We were just having a grown-up discussion. Victor ran a hand through his hair, visibly composing himself. Hey, buddy, What have you been drawing today? Eli hesitated, then slowly opened his sketchbook. The page showed a detailed drawing of a cave entrance set into red rock walls. Strange symbols were etched around the opening, and inside, barely visible in the shadows, were what looked like plants with distinctive star-shaped flowers. I saw it in my dream last night, Eli explained. Dad was there. He was trying to show me something important. Maya and Victor exchanged glances. It's just a dream, Eli, Victor said gently. But it's a really good drawing. Maya studied the image more closely. These symbols, they look like Apache petroglyphs. She traced them with her finger. Where did you see these, mijo? Eli shrugged. I just drew what I saw in the dream. Honey. That night after Eli had gone to bed, Victor stood in the darkened kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear. He's drawing the cave now, he said quietly, just like you said he would. The voice on the other end was professionally clipped. We need a sample. The markers in his blood are showing increased activity. I can't just take his blood, Victor hissed. Maya watches him like a hawk. You're running out of time, Dela Cruz. If you don't deliver, we'll have to take more direct action. And then I'll have no choice but to tell Maya the truth about what happened to her husband. Victor's hand tightened around the phone. You promised no one would get hurt this time. That depends entirely on your cooperation, came the cold reply. You have 48 hours. After ending the call, Victor moved to the window. In the moonlight, he could see Spirit standing at the edge of his corral, head raised as if scenting the air. The horse was looking directly at the house at Eli's bedroom window with an alertness that seemed almost human. Victor shivered despite the warm night. Daniel had always claimed the Mustang was special, that it had some kind of connection to the Rodriguez family that went beyond normal human-animal bonds. Victor had dismissed it as his friend's Apache superstitions. Now, watching the horse stand sentinel in the moonlight, he wasn't so sure. The next morning brought no relief from the tension. Maya left early for the veterinary clinic where she worked, reminding Victor that Eli needed to take his medication with breakfast. And try to keep him indoors during the hottest part of the day, she added, kissing Eli's forehead. Your skin is looking a little red again. After she left, Victor sat across from his stepson at the kitchen table, watching the boy push cereal around in his bowl. The red marks on Eli's wrists had spread slightly overnight now, extending partway up his forearms in a pattern that reminded Victor uncomfortably of flames. Not hungry? He asked. Eli shook his head. My joints hurt a little. Victor pushed the pill bottle across the table. Take your medicine, it'll help. As Eli swallowed the medication, Victor studied him. The boy had Daniel's eyes, thoughtful, observant, missing nothing. What would those eyes look like if they knew the truth about his stepfather's role in Daniel's death? I was thinking, Victor said suddenly, maybe we could take a trip today, just you and me. Eli looked up surprised. What about the garage? I closed it for the day, thought we could do something special. Victor forced a smile. Maybe go looking for that cave you drew. The boy's eyes widened. Really, you think it's real? Only one way to find out. Victor stood, trying to ignore the guilt churning in his stomach. Pack a backpack with water and snacks. We'll make a day of it. As Eli hurried to get ready, Victor went to the garage and retrieved a small medical kit from a locked cabinet. Inside was a syringe and collection vials equipment Maya had brought home from the veterinary clinic. He slipped it into his pocket, then grabbed a larger first aid kit and 2 extra gallons of water. Just a precaution, he told himself. They weren't going far into the desert, just far enough for privacy. When they stepped outside, Spirit was watching them from the corral. As Victor helped Eli into the truck, the Mustang suddenly let out a shrill whiny and began pacing agitatedly, tossing his head. He doesn't want me to go, Eli said, looking back at the horse. Victor closed the truck door firmly. It's just a horse, Eli. It doesn't understand what we're doing. As they drove away, Spirit's cries followed them, growing increasingly frantic. Victor glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the Mustang rearing up, hooves striking the corral fence with enough force to make the wood shudder. He'll be fine, Victor said, more to himself than to Eli. We'll be back before dinner. They drove for nearly an hour following the main highway before turning onto progressively smaller roads. Eventually, they were on little more than a dirt track that wound between towering red rock formations. The landscape was breathtaking in its stark beauty, painted cliffs rising from the desert floor, twisted juniper trees clinging to impossible perches, the occasional flash of green where hidden water sources sustained life against all odds. "How much further?" Eli asked, his face pressed to the window. "Not far," Victor lied. In truth, he had no destination in mind except isolation. They came to a small box canyon that offered shade and privacy. Victor parked the truck and helped Eli out. "Let's explore a bit. Maybe your cave is around here somewhere." For the next hour, they hiked through the canyon, Victor pointing out interesting rock formations and the few hardy plants that survived in this harsh environment. Eli seemed to enjoy the adventure, though Victor noticed he tired quickly, occasionally rubbing his joints when he thought Victor wasn't looking. Finally, they settled in a shaded area beside a small, unexpected pool of water, a natural catchment where rainwater had collected and somehow persisted despite the heat. "Are you thirsty?" Victor asked, pulling bottled water from his pack. Eli nodded gratefully, taking a long drink. As the boy set the bottle down, Victor saw his opportunity. "You know," he said casually, "I brought a first aid kit. Maybe we should put something on those red marks. They look like they're bothering you." Eli glanced at his arms. "Mom usually puts aloe on them." "I've got something like that here," Victor said, opening the kit. He prepared the syringe behind the cover of the open lid, his heart hammering in his chest. "Just need to clean the area first." He took Eli's arm, gently swabbing the inside of his elbow with an alcohol wipe. "This might sting a little, but it'll help with the pain too." As he positioned the needle, Victor found his hands shaking. Eli was looking up at him with complete trust, the same way he had looked at Daniel. "What's that?" Eli asked suddenly, pointing with his free hand. Victor turned to look, and in that moment of distraction, Eli pulled his arm away. "There's something in the water," the boy said, moving toward the pool. Victor quickly concealed the syringe. "Probably just a reflection." But Eli was already kneeling at the water's edge, his expression one of wonder. "It's moving, like it's alive." Curious despite himself, Victor joined him. The water was crystal clear, revealing smooth stones at the bottom. At first he saw nothing unusual, but then a shimmer of movement, a swirl of color that shouldn't be there. "What the hell?" he muttered. Eli reached out his fingertips, just touching the surface. The moment they made contact, the water seemed to respond, rippling outward in perfect concentric circles, despite the absence of wind or disturbance. Victor grabbed Eli's arm, pulling him back. "Don't touch it." "It's okay," Eli said, his voice strangely calm. "It's just saying hello." Before Victor could respond, a sound echoed through the canyon, the unmistakable call of a horse. Both of them looked up, scanning the rim of the canyon walls. There, silhouetted against the azure sky, stood Spirit. The Mustang shouldn't have been there, couldn't have been there. The corral was secure, the ranch miles away. Yet the distinctive crescent scar, visible even at this distance, confirmed the impossible. Somehow Spirit had broken free and followed them into the desert. The horse picked its way down the steep canyon wall with impossible sure-footedness, moving with purpose directly toward them. Victor stepped in front of Eli protectively, but the boy ducked around him and ran to meet the Mustang. "Spirit," he called, joy evident in his voice. "How did you find us?" The horse trotted the final distance, stopping to nuzzle Eli's outstretched hand. His coat was dusty from the journey sides, heaving slightly from exertion, but his eyes were alert and focused. Victor stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket, a text message from the number he'd spoken to last night. "We're tracking the boy's vitals through his medication. Something's happening. Get the sample now." Cold realization washed over Victor. They'd been monitoring Eli all along, probably from the first prescription. The pills weren't just treating his symptoms. They were tagging him, tracking him like an animal. Spirit suddenly raised his head, nostrils flaring. The Mustang's ears laid back flat against his skull as he positioned himself between Eli and Victor, teeth bared in an unmistakable threat display. "He knows," Victor whispered, backing away. "Somehow he knows what I was going to do." Eli looked between them, confusion written across his face. "What's wrong? Why is Spirit acting like this?" Victor's mind raced. His options were evaporating by the second. If he returned without the sample, they would come for Eli directly, and they would reveal Victor's betrayal of Daniel. If he tried to take the sample by force, now Spirit would attack. And somewhere deep inside, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Daniel's was asking, What kind of man have you become? Eli, Victor said carefully, I need to tell you something important. But before he could continue, the distant sound of helicopter rotors echoed through the canyon. Spirit's head jerked up, eyes wild with what could only be described as recognition and fear. They're coming, Victor said, decision made in an instant. Eli, you need to get on Spirit and ride. Now. Who's coming? I don't understand. Victor cut him off, urgency making his voice harsh. There's no time to explain. Those people in the helicopter, they want to take you away to study you. Like a lab rat. Your father discovered something they wanted to keep secret, and now they're after you too. Eli's face paled. But why would you bring me out here if... Because I was going to help them, Victor admitted, shame burning through him. I was supposed to get a sample of your blood, but I can't do it. He looked at Spirit, who was watching him intently. I won't betray Daniel again. The sound of the helicopter grew louder. Victor lifted Eli onto Spirit's back, then pressed his truck keys into the boy's hand. The truck is yours now. Drive it when you're older, he said, attempting a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Spirit will keep you safe. He'll take you to someone who can help. But I don't know how to ride, Eli protested, clutching Spirit's mane. You don't need to. He knows where to go. Victor stepped back. Tell your mother. Tell her I'm sorry. For everything. Spirit needed no command. The moment Victor stepped away, the Mustang wheeled and galloped toward the far end of the canyon, Eli clinging to his back. Victor watched them go, then turned to face the approaching helicopter. He drew the gun he kept in an ankle holster, a habit from his military days, and prepared to buy Eli as much time as he could. Eli clung desperately to Spirit's mane as the Mustang raced through the desert landscape. Having never ridden before, each jarring stride threatened to unseat him. Yet somehow, when his grip began to slip, Spirit seemed to sense it and adjusted his gait until Eli regained his balance. Where are we going? Eli shouted, but his words were lost to the wind. They crested a ridge, and Spirit paused momentarily, giving Eli a chance to look back. In the distance, the helicopter hovered over the canyon they had left behind. A series of sharp cracks echoed across the desert gunshots. Eli's heart constricted. Victor, he whispered. Spirit nickered softly as if in acknowledgement of the boy's distress, then continued forward at a more measured pace. As they descended the far side of the ridge, the helicopter disappeared from view, though its distant thrum still carried on the air. Time lost meaning as they traveled deeper into the desert. The sun arced overhead, then began its slow descent toward the western horizon. Eli's throat burned with thirst, his skin stinging where it was exposed to the sun despite the protection of his long-sleeved shirt. The red marks on his arms pulsed with a dull heat that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. Just as Eli thought he couldn't hold on any longer, Spirit brought them to a small hidden valley where a cluster of stunted trees surrounded a tiny spring. The Mustang halted beside the water, lowering himself carefully to allow Eli to slide from his back. Eli dropped to his knees beside the spring, cupping water to his parched lips. It tasted of minerals and earth, but it was the sweetest thing he had ever drunk. After slaking his thirst, he splashed water on his face and arms, sighing with relief as it cooled his inflamed skin. Spirit drank beside him, then lifted his head suddenly, ears pricked forward. Eli followed his gaze and froze. They were not alone. At the far end of the small valley, partially hidden in the lengthening shadows, stood a herd of wild horses, perhaps 15 animals of varying colors, all watching Spirit and Eli with cautious attention. At their head was a powerful stallion with a coat the color of desert sand. Spirit let out a soft whiny that seemed almost like a greeting. The lead stallion responded with a more challenging call, pawing at the ground with one hoof. Are they your family? Eli whispered to Spirit. As if in answer, Spirit began to approach the herd, moving slowly but with purpose. Eli started to follow, but the Mustang turned and nudged him back toward the spring, clearly indicating he should stay. Eli watched as Spirit approached the wild herd. The lead stallion moved forward to meet him, and for a tense moment Eli feared they would fight. Instead, they engaged in what appeared to be a complex greeting ritual, circling, sniffing, exchanging soft sounds, too quiet for Eli to hear. After what seemed like an eternity, the lead stallion tossed his head and turned, leading the herd away, with Spirit integrated among them. Only then did Eli realize Spirit was leaving him. Wait, he called, panic rising in his chest. Don't leave me here. Oh no, but the herd continued to move away, disappearing into a narrow pass between the rocks. The last glimpse Eli had of Spirit was the Mustang looking back once the crescent scar visible for an instant before he vanished after the others. Abandonment crashed over Eli like a physical wave. First his father, then Victor, and now Spirit. Everyone left him in the end. He sank to the ground beside the spring, tears finally breaking free to track down his dust-covered cheeks. The sun was setting rapidly now, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped with alarming speed. Eli huddled against the trunk of the largest tree, shivering in his light clothing. The sounds of the desert night rose around him, the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth, the distant howl of a coyote, the whisper of wind through stone. Despite his fear and exhaustion, Eli found his eyes growing heavy. Just before sleep claimed him, he thought he saw a figure standing on the ridge above the valley, the silhouette of a man outlined against the star-filled sky, watching over him. "Dad?" he whispered, but exhaustion pulled him under before he could be sure. Eli dreamed of the cave again, but this time the dream was more vivid, more urgent. He saw the symbols carved around the entrance, recognized them as the same ones his father had shown him in old books about Apache culture. Inside the cave, the star-shaped flowers glowed with an inner light, illuminating ancient paintings on the walls. Horses and humans joined in what appeared to be a sacred bond. A voice spoke, familiar yet distant. "Follow the water, son. It will lead you home." Eli awoke with a start. Dawn was breaking, pale light seeping into the valley. He was stiff from the cold and his uncomfortable position, but the pain in his joints had subsided somewhat. The red marks on his arms seemed to have spread further overnight, now reaching almost to his shoulders in intricate patterns. He was contemplating his next move when a sound made him look up. Spirit had returned alone this time, standing at the edge of the valley watching him. Relief flooded through Eli. "You came back!" The Mustang approached, lowering his head to nudge Eli gently, as if in apology for his absence. Behind him, Eli could see hoofprints in the sand, many sets evidence that the wild herd had been there recently. "Did you bring them to help?" Eli asked, stroking Spirit's neck. Spirit nickered softly, then turned his head to look toward the narrow pass where the herd had disappeared the night before. When Eli didn't immediately move, the horse nudged him again, more insistently. "You want me to follow you?" With effort, Eli pulled himself onto Spirit's back once more. The Mustang set off at a gentle walk, clearly mindful of the boy's fatigue. They passed through the narrow defile into another larger valley where the wild herd waited. The horses parted as Spirit approached, forming a path to what appeared to be the dried bed of an ancient river. Spirit followed this natural pathway, the wild horses falling in behind them like an honor guard. Eli sat straighter on Spirit's back, a strange sense of importance filling him, despite his fear and confusion. They traveled for hours following the riverbed as it wound deeper into the desert. Occasionally, Spirit would stop at seemingly random spots, pawing at the sand, until water seeped up from below, hidden sources that Eli would never have found on his own. By midday, they had left the wild herd behind and entered a region of towering rock formations that cast long shadows across their path. The heat was intense, but Spirit seemed to know exactly where to find shade and water at regular intervals. As the sun began its downward arc once more, Eli noticed something strange. The red marks on his arms, which had always been sources of pain and embarrassment, seemed to be responding to the landscape. When they approached water sources, the patterns would warm slightly, almost tingling. It was as if his skin was becoming a map, sensing what his eyes could not see. "I can feel the water," he whispered in wonder, placing his hand on Spirit's neck. "Is that what these marks mean?" Spirit's ears flicked back at the sound of his voice, but offered no other response. They continued their journey until the shadows lengthened into twilight once more. Just as Eli was beginning to worry about spending another night in the open desert, they rounded a massive rock formation, and he gasped. Before them, exactly as he had drawn it in his sketchbook, was the cave entrance, a dark opening in the red rock wall, surrounded by ancient symbols carved into the stone. Star-shaped flowers, unlike any Eli had seen before, grew in clusters around the entrance, their blooms closed for the night, but still recognizable. "It's real," Eli breathed. "My dream was real." Spirit approached the cave cautiously, stopping several yards from the entrance. The Mustang's nostrils flared as he scented the air ears, moving constantly as if listening for danger. Eli slid from Spirit's back legs, wobbling after the long ride. His throat was parched again, his skin hot to the touch. The cave beckoned with the promise of shade and rest. "Is it safe?" he asked, looking to Spirit for guidance. The horse nudged him forward gently, then followed a few steps behind as Eli approached the cave entrance. The symbols carved into the rock seemed to shimmer slightly in the fading light, or perhaps it was just Eli's tired eyes playing tricks on him. The interior was cool and dark after the heat of the day. As Eli's eyes adjusted, he made out a spacious chamber with a high ceiling. Water trickled down one wall, collecting in a small pool, similar to the one where he and Victor had stopped the day before. Ancient paintings covered the walls, horses and humans, stars and plants and symbols Eli recognized from his father's books. "Someone lived here," he said, voice echoing slightly in the enclosed space. He moved deeper into the cave, drawn to a particular section of paintings that depicted a human figure with markings similar to those on Eli's arms. The figure was shown placing its hands on the ground, and from that spot plants were growing. "The water finder," came a weak voice from the shadows. Eli whirled around, heart pounding. Spirit reared slightly in surprise, hooves striking sparks from the stone floor. From a dark recess of the cave, a figure emerged, an older woman, supporting herself against the wall. Her clothes were torn and dusty, her face lined with pain and exhaustion. Despite her condition, there was a dignity in her bearing, an intelligence in her eyes that immediately commanded respect. "Who are you?" Eli asked, backing toward Spirit. The woman coughed, wincing with the effort. "My name is Dr. Sophia Reyes. I've been searching for this cave for over 20 years. Her gaze fixed on Eli's arms, where the red markings were clearly visible in the dim light. "And I've been searching for you even longer, child of the Rodriguez line." Sophia took a step forward, then stumbled. Spirit moved quickly, positioning himself so the woman could lean against his side. She looked at the Mustang with a mixture of wonder and recognition. "The Guardian returns," she murmured, placing a trembling hand on Spirit's neck. "Just as the story said." Eli approached cautiously. "You're sick." "Yes." Sophia pushed up the sleeve of her shirt, revealing red markings identical to Eli's own. "The same condition that affects you that affected your father Daniel and your grandfather James before him." Eli's eyes widened. "You know my family. I knew them all." Sophia said, her voice softening with memory. "James was my first love back when we were both young and the world seemed simpler. Daniel was my research partner, my friend." She looked directly at Eli. "And you, Eli Rodriguez, may be the most important of all." Outside, the last light of day faded from the sky. Inside the cave, the story of 3 generations began to unfold, illuminated by the glow of ancient paintings and the shared mystery of a bloodline marked by both gift and burden. As night settled fully over the desert, a jeep lay abandoned and half-buried in sand 10 miles away. Nearby, a crashed helicopter smoldered, its crew, either dead or long since departed. And miles away in another direction, a woman named Maya Rodriguez stood in an empty corral, clutching a broken halter and staring out at the vast desert that had taken her husband 5 years ago and now had taken her son as well. The desert remembers, but it also reveals its secrets to those worthy of receiving them. And sometimes those secrets are carried on 4 legs, guided by instincts older than human memory. The night held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to begin. In the cool darkness of the ancient cave, Sophia Reyes sank down beside the small pool of water, her strength visibly fading. Eli knelt beside her, concern overriding his initial wariness. Up close, the resemblance between their conditions was unmistakable. The same flame-like markings spreading across their skin, the same feverish heat radiating from them. "You need medicine," Eli said, looking around helplessly. "Do you have any with you?" Sophia shook her head weakly. "My supplies were in my jeep. It broke down 2 days ago." She gestured toward the back of the cave. "I made it here on foot, following the old maps, but then I couldn't leave." Spirit moved closer, his massive form casting elongated shadows on the cave walls in the dimming light. The Mustang lowered his head to the pool, drinking deeply, then raised it again, water dripping from his muzzle. He nudged Eli gently, then looked pointedly at Sophia. "I think he wants me to help you," Eli said, reaching for his backpack. "I have some water and food from when Victor and I—" His voice trailed off as memories of the day's events returned in a rush. "Victor, do you think he's okay?" Sophia's gaze sharpened. "Victor de la Cruz. He was with you." Eli nodded, handing her a water bottle. "He brought me into the desert, but then a helicopter came. He told me to ride away with Spirit. He said the people in the helicopter wanted to take me away. To study me." Sophia drank deeply, some color returning to her weathered face. "Horizon Biotech," she murmured. "They've been hunting the Rodriguez bloodline for generations." She studied Eli's face, noting the confusion and fear he was trying so hard to mask. Setting aside the water bottle, she patted the ground beside her. "Come sit. You've been running all day. You must be exhausted." Eli hesitated, then settled beside her. Spirit remained standing, positioning himself near the cave entrance, like a sentinel. "How do you know my family?" Eli asked. "And how do you have the same condition as us?" Sophia's eyes took on a distant look, as if seeing across decades. "It began in Vietnam, 1973. I was a young anthropologist studying traditional medicine. Your grandfather, James Rodriguez, was a soldier who should have died in the jungle." She smiled faintly. "But a horse saved him, appeared from nowhere, carried him to safety." "Like Spirit saved me today," Eli whispered. "Yes." Sophia nodded. "After James returned home, we stayed in touch. I was fascinated by his Apache heritage, the stories of his people. But I was even more fascinated by what happened to him after Vietnam." She rolled up her sleeve further, revealing the full extent of the markings on her arm. The markings appeared on James first. The military doctors called it a strange autoimmune reaction, perhaps to something he encountered in the jungle. But James believed it was something else, a gift from what he called the spirit horse. Eli stared at her markings, then at his own. "A gift, but it hurts. Sometimes so much I can't even get out of bed." "All transformations involve pain," Sophia said gently. James believed the markings were signs of awakening, the human body adapting to perceive what others cannot. She gestured to the ancient paintings on the cave walls. "The Apache called people with these markings the water finders. They could sense underground streams, locate springs in the most desolate places. They were sacred to the tribe, essential for survival in this harsh land." "Is that why I can feel the water?" Eli asked, eyes widening. "Today when we were traveling, I could sense where it was hidden under the sand." Sophia nodded, excitement briefly overcoming her exhaustion. "Exactly. James developed the same ability. Later, your father Daniel did too." Her expression clouded. "But the military had been monitoring James since Vietnam. When they realized what was happening, they created a special research division, what eventually became Horizon Biotech. To study people like us? To weaponize people like us," Sophia corrected grimly. "Imagine soldiers who could find water in any desert, who could potentially develop other heightened senses. They wanted to understand the mechanism, reproduce it." Eli wrapped his arms around himself, suddenly cold despite the lingering heat of the day. "So they want me because I have these abilities. That, and because you're young. Your adaptations are still developing." Sophia hesitated, then added, "And because of what your father discovered before he died." At the mention of his father, Eli leaned forward eagerly. What did he find?" Before Sophia could answer, Spirit suddenly lifted his head, ears swiveling toward the cave entrance. A low warning rumble emanated from the Mustang's chest. "Someone's coming," Sophia whispered, attempting to rise. Eli helped her to her feet, both of them backing deeper into the cave. Spirit remained at the entrance, his powerful body tense, ready to defend. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, a new sound reached them, the soft, rhythmic padding of footsteps, too light to be human. Spirit's posture relaxed slightly, though he remained alert. Into the cave walked a coyote, lean and gray, with intelligent eyes that gleamed in the darkness. It stopped several yards from Spirit, sitting on its haunches, and regarding them with an almost human assessment. "Don't be afraid," Sophia said quietly. "It's just curious." But Eli felt something more than curiosity emanating from the wild canine. It tilted its head, looking directly at him, then turned and trotted a few steps toward the cave entrance before looking back expectantly. "It wants us to follow," Eli said with certainty. Sophia glanced at him sharply. "How do you know?" "I just know." Eli couldn't explain the sudden connection he felt similar to, but different from his bond with Spirit. "It's trying to show us something." Spirit snorted softly, moving to stand beside Eli. The Mustang showed no aggression toward the coyote, which Eli instinctively knew was unusual. "We should go with it," Eli decided. "Can you walk?" Sophia nodded, though doubt flickered across her face. "Not quickly, but yes." They emerged from the cave into a desert night transformed by moonlight. The landscape glowed silver and blue, the harsh contours of day softened into an alien beauty. The coyote waited a few yards ahead, its fur silvered by the moon. With Spirit on one side and Eli supporting Sophia on the other, they followed the coyote as it led them along a narrow path winding between massive rock formations. The night air was cool against their skin, a blessed relief after the day's heat. "In Apache belief," Sophia said as they walked, "coyotes are tricksters, but also guides between worlds. They appear when transformation is coming." The coyote led them perhaps half a mile from the cave, up a gentle slope, to a flat area atop a mesa. There, silhouetted against the star-filled sky, stood the wild horse herd they had encountered earlier. The horses had formed a loose circle, and at its center burned a small campfire. Beside the fire sat an elderly man with long gray hair braided with hawk feathers. His deeply lined face was the color of the surrounding rocks, weathered by decades under the desert sun. He wore a simple denim shirt and jeans, but around his neck hung an intricate necklace of silver and turquoise. As they approached, the man looked up, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "I've been waiting for you, little water finder," he said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. "The ancestors said you would come when the desert needed you most." Sophia gasped, recognition flooding her face. "Joe Blackfeather!" The old man's weathered face creased in a smile. "Dr. Reyes, you have aged since we last met." "And you haven't changed at all," Sophia replied, a note of wonder in her voice. Eli looked between them, confusion evident. "You know each other?" "Joe was my guide when I first came to study Apache medicine," Sophia explained. "That was nearly 40 years ago. He was already an elder then." Joe Blackfeather gestured for them to join him by the fire. "The years touch me lightly. It is the gift of my people to bend with time rather than break against it." As they settled around the fire, Spirit remained standing nearby, occasionally exchanging soft whickers with the wild horses that formed their protective circle. The coyote sat at Joe's side, looking for all the world like a domestic dog, rather than a wild predator. "How did you find us?" Eli asked. Joe pointed to the coyote. "Shadow has been watching over you since you entered our lands. The horses brought word that the son of Daniel Rodriguez had returned." His gaze shifted to Spirit, "and that the guardian had found his purpose once again." "You knew my father." "I knew all the Rodriguez men," Joe said, reaching into a leather pouch at his side. He extracted a handful of dried herbs, which he sprinkled onto the fire. A sweet, pungent smoke rose, carrying an aroma that somehow reminded Eli of rain. "Your grandfather James was a warrior who learned to heal. Your father Daniel was a healer who learned to fight. And you young Eli are both warrior and healer born." The old man's eyes, sharp despite his age, focused on the red markings visible on Eli's arms. "The signs grow stronger in you. Earlier than in your father or grandfather, the desert calls to your blood more urgently now." "Because of climate change," Sophia interjected. "The desert is expanding, water growing scarcer. If Eli's abilities are tied to finding water, then the earth needs him more than ever." Joe finished nodding. "But it is more than that. The balance is shifting. The old ways and the new must find harmony, or both will be lost." He turned to a small bundle beside him, unwrapping layers of cloth to reveal several plants with distinctive, star-shaped flowers, the same ones that grew outside the cave entrance. "This is what Daniel Rodriguez died protecting," Joe said solemnly. "The star flower. For 1,000 years, my people have used it in sacred ceremonies to open the mind to the whispers of the earth. But used improperly by those who seek power rather than understanding, it could be weaponized." Sophia finished, her expression grim. That's what Horizon discovered. The plants interact with our unique physiology, enhancing the abilities that are already emerging. Joe nodded. Daniel came to me 5 years ago. He had discovered old records from military experiments on your grandfather treatments that combined traditional Apache medicine with modern science. He believed he could create a treatment to help control the pain of your condition while preserving the gifts. But Horizon didn't want a treatment, Sophia added. They wanted to isolate the compounds, create a drug that could temporarily induce these abilities in their operatives. When Daniel refused to help them, they arranged his death. Joe confirmed, his face solemn in the firelight. But they did not find what they sought. Daniel had hidden his research in the location of the starflower's primary growing site. Eli stared into the fire, processing these revelations. The cave, he said suddenly. That's why I dreamed about it. Dad was trying to show me where he hid his research. Joe smiled approvingly. The bond between father and son transcends death, especially in bloodlines as old as yours. Your ancestors have always spoken to their children through dreams. A soft noise from Spirit drew their attention. The Mustang had moved closer to Eli, his large eyes reflecting the firelight. Joe studied the horse with evident respect. This one carries the spirit of a great protector, the old man said. He has watched over your family for generations, taking different forms when needed. Different forms? Eli asked, confused. Joe merely smiled. There are mysteries even I cannot explain fully. But know this: the horse that saved your grandfather in Vietnam, the Mustang that found your father in the sandstorm, and this spirit who guards you now, they are connected by more than coincidence. Sophia leaned forward, wincing slightly at the movement. Joe, Eli needs to know everything. About his condition, about what Daniel discovered. The markings are spreading faster on him than they ever did on James or Daniel. And on me. Well, you can see. Joe studied her with compassion. You took a great risk injecting yourself with the compound Daniel created. I had to understand, Sophia said simply. After Daniel disappeared, someone had to continue the research. To protect Eli. The old man nodded, then turned to Eli. The markings are not a disease to be cured, but they can be managed. Daniel discovered that the star flower, prepared in a specific way, can help balance the changes happening in your body. Without it, the transformation happens too quickly, causing pain and fever as your body struggles to adapt. Transform into what? Eli asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Into a water finder, a desert speaker, one who can hear the voice of the earth and understand its needs. Joe gestured to the horses surrounding them. Like these Mustangs sense coming storms or hidden springs, you will develop senses beyond ordinary humans. But unlike them, your mind was not born ready for such awareness. It must be recalibrated, slowly. Sophia reached for her pack, withdrawing a worn leather journal. Daniel's research. I recovered it from his office after they said he died in the sandstorm. He had created a treatment protocol combining the star flower with modern anti-inflammatory compounds, something that would allow the abilities to develop safely. The treatment I've been taking, Eli realized, it wasn't working anymore because it was missing the star flower component. Error, Joe nodded gravely. And without proper treatment, your abilities will continue to emerge chaotically, causing increasing pain. Eventually, he didn't need to finish. The implication was clear in his somber expression. How long do I have? Eli asked, surprising himself with his calmness. Without treatment, perhaps a week before the pain becomes debilitating, a month before permanent damage occurs. Joe placed a weathered hand on Eli's shoulder. But you are here now. We can begin the proper protocol tonight. A distant sound interrupted them, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors still far off but unmistakable. They're still searching, Sophia said, her voice tight with fear. Joe rose to his feet with surprising agility for his age. They cannot find the cave or the star flowers. The knowledge must be protected. He turned to Eli. You must make a choice, young waterfinder. Stay with us and learn to control your gifts, or return to your mother and the world you know. My mom, Eli breathed, guilt washing over him. She must be so worried. I need to let her know I'm okay. A worthy concern, Joe acknowledged. But consider carefully. If you return now, Horizon will find you. They will take you study, use you to find what they seek. The sound of the helicopter grew slightly louder, though still distant. The wild horses shifted restlessly, sensing the tension among the humans. There is a third option, Sophia said suddenly. Maya Rodriguez is a skilled veterinarian and researcher. She was helping Daniel with his work, though she may not have realized its full significance. Joe considered this. The mother of the waterfinder would be welcome among us, and another scientist might help complete what Daniel began. But how can we reach her? Eli asked. We can't just walk into town, and I don't even know exactly where we are. Spirit, who had been standing quietly nearby, suddenly stepped forward, nudging Eli's shoulder insistently. I think Spirit has an idea, Sophia said, a faint smile crossing her face. Joe nodded as if this was exactly what he had expected. The Guardian knows the way, but first we must prepare. He reached again into his pouch, withdrawing a small clay bowl and a knife with a bone handle. A message written in the old way will reach your mother's heart more surely than any modern method. Maya Rodriguez paced the length of her living room phone, pressed to her ear, her face etched with the particular anguish only a mother missing her child can know. No, Sheriff, I don't know exactly where Victor took him, she said, frustration bleeding through her attempt at calm. He just said they were going exploring. That was 12 hours ago. Sheriff Dawson's voice crackled through the speaker. We've got deputies checking all the usual day trip spots. Victor's truck was spotted on a Forest Service camera heading out toward Painted Rock, so we're focusing our search there. And the helicopter, Maya asked. The one my neighbor said she saw flying low over the desert this afternoon. Not one of ours, Dawson admitted. Could be Border Patrol. Could be private. Hard to say. Maya closed her eyes briefly, fighting back tears of frustration. Please just find my son. After ending the call, she moved to the window, staring out at the darkness, as if willpower alone could penetrate the night and reveal Eli's location. The empty corral where Spirit should have been stood as another accusation, another mystery. The sound of tires on gravel jerked her attention to the driveway. A black SUV with government plates pulled up, and two men in dark suits emerged. Maya's heart leapt, then immediately sank. Not Sheriff Dawson with news, not Victor returning with Eli. Something else entirely. She opened the door before they could knock. Yes. The older of the two men offered a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm Agent Clark with Homeland Security. This is my colleague, Agent Mercer. May we come in? It's about your son. Maya hesitated, instinct warning her against allowing these men into her home. But if they had information about Eli... What about my son? She asked, not moving from the doorway. Clark's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. We have reason to believe he may be in danger. Your husband, Victor de la Cruz, was found shot in the desert this afternoon. Before he lost consciousness, he mentioned that Eli was with him. Cold fear washed over Maya. Victor was shot. Is he alive but in critical condition? Clark said smoothly. He's being airlifted to a specialized facility in Phoenix. I need to see him, Maya said immediately. Of course. We can take you to him now. Clark gestured toward their vehicle. And on the way, you can help us understand what your son might have been doing in a restricted area of the desert. Maya's instinct screamed louder. I'd prefer to drive myself. If you could just give me the name of the facility. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Clark interrupted, his pretense of friendliness evaporating. Dr. Rodriguez, we know about your husband's research into the Rodriguez syndrome. We know about the Starflower compound. And we strongly suspect your son is developing the same abilities that made your husband so interesting to certain parties. Maya took an involuntary step backward. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Clark nodded to Mercer, who produced a tablet and played a video-grainy surveillance footage of Eli in a hospital room during one of his treatment sessions. As they watched, Eli placed his hand on a glass of water, and the liquid responded, rising slightly against gravity to meet his palm. Remarkable, isn't it? Clark said softly. We've been monitoring Eli's development through his medication for years. The tracking compounds were quite sophisticated, allowing us to measure his physiological responses remotely. Horror and rage surged through Maya in equal measure. You've been experimenting on my child without consent. Your husband gave consent, Clark corrected. Not Daniel Victor. After Daniel's unfortunate accident, Victor became quite cooperative. Until today, when he apparently had a change of heart. His expression hardened. Now, Dr. Rodriguez, you can come with us voluntarily and help us find your son, or we can make this much more difficult. Maya glanced past them to the dark road beyond, calculating her chances of escape. Slim to none. Let me get my coat, she said, stalling for time. Clark nodded, satisfied. 2 minutes, then we leave. Maya moved to the closet, mind racing. As she reached for her coat, her hand brushed against something else. Daniel's old service revolver, kept loaded in case of desert predators. She slipped it into her coat pocket, then quickly grabbed her phone and sent a text to the only person she could think of who might understand what was happening. The message was brief. Horizon has found Eli. They're taking me. Find Joe Blackfeather. She sent it to Helen and Eli's doctor, just as Clark called out that her time was up. Outside, Maya allowed herself to be guided toward the SUV, the weight of the gun heavy in her pocket. She had no intention of using it unless absolutely necessary. Violence had never been her way. But for Eli, she would do whatever it took. As they approached the vehicle, a strange sound echoed from the darkness beyond the house. A lone coyote howling answered immediately by the distant whinny of a horse. Clark and Mercer both tensed, hands moving instinctively toward their weapons. Just wildlife, Mercer said dismissively, but Maya felt something shift inside her, a certainty blooming where fear had dominated moments before. Those weren't random animal calls. Somehow she knew Eli was reaching out to her. Before she could act on this realization, the night erupted into chaos. From the shadows beyond the house came a thunder of hooves as a dozen wild horses burst into the yard, led by a familiar dark shape. Spirit, the crescent scar on his shoulder, gleaming in the security lights. Clark and Mercer drew their weapons, shouting at each other and at Maya to get down, get in the car. But Maya was already moving, diving away from them toward the oncoming horses. Spirit broke from the herd, charging directly at the agents. They fired bullets, kicking up dirt around the Mustang, but somehow missing the charging animal. With incredible precision, Spirit barreled between them, knocking both men to the ground before wheeling back toward Maya. Without hesitation, Maya grabbed the Mustang's mane and swung herself onto his back, a skill she hadn't used since her youth on the reservation. Spirit didn't wait for instructions, immediately galloping away from the house, with the wild herd flowing around them like a living river. Behind them, Maya heard shouts and more gunshots, but they were already disappearing into the desert night, guided by moonlight and the Mustang's uncanny sense of direction. "Take me to Eli," she whispered against Spirit's ear, and felt the horse surge forward with renewed purpose. They rode for hours, the wild herd gradually peeling away, until only Spirit and Maya remained, moving steadily deeper into the desert. Despite the circumstances, Maya found herself marveling at the Mustang's stamina and sure-footedness, navigating terrain that would have been treacherous even in daylight. As dawn painted the eastern sky with pale light, they crested a ridge, and Maya gasped. Below them stretched a hidden valley she had never seen before, though she'd lived in this region all her life. At its center, a small camp was visible, a fire, several figures and horses standing guard. Spirit nickered softly, announcing their approach. One of the figures stood up quickly, shading his eyes against the rising sun. "Mom!" Eli's voice carried clearly in the still morning air. Maya slid from Spirit's back and ran the last few yards, gathering her son into a fierce embrace. "Eli! Oh my God, are you okay? I was so worried." "I'm okay, Mom," Eli assured her, his arms tight around her waist. "Spirit protected me, and I met some people who knew Dad, and Grandpa James too." Only then did Maya become fully aware of the others at the camp, an elderly Apache man watching with serene eyes and a woman whose face jolted Maya with recognition. "Sophia Reyes," she breathed, "but you disappeared years ago. After Daniel—" "Hello, Maya," Sophia said, rising stiffly to her feet. "I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances, but I think it's time you learned the full truth about your husband's work and about your son's legacy." The sun climbed higher, illuminating the gathering with golden light. Spirit moved to stand protectively near Eli, while other horses maintained a vigilant perimeter around the camp. A coyote, the same one that had howled near Maya's house she somehow knew, sat nearby, watching the proceedings with intelligent eyes. Maya looked from Sophia to the elderly Apache man, then down at her son, noticing for the first time the extent of the red markings on his arms, more developed than she had ever seen them before. Tell me everything, she said, settling beside the fire. About Daniel, about these people from Horizon, about whatever's happening to my son. It began generations ago. The old man said, his voice carrying the weight of ancient stories. With the first water finders and the pact they made with the desert spirits. But for your family, it began more recently in a distant jungle where a young soldier named James Rodriguez should have died, but was saved by forces beyond ordinary understanding. As Joe Blackfeather spoke, the rising sun illuminated the desert around them, revealing beauty in what many saw only as desolation. And in that moment, surrounded by horses and history, Maya felt something shift within her, a recognition of patterns larger than her scientific training had prepared her to see connections deeper than rational explanation could satisfy. The desert wasn't just a place. It was alive in ways she had never fully understood, and somehow, impossibly, it had chosen her family to hear its voice. Dr. Helen Chen stared at the text message on her phone, reading it for perhaps the 20th time since it had arrived in the middle of the night. Horizon has found Eli. They're taking me. Find Joe Blackfeather. She should report this. That would be the professional thing to do. Contact the authorities, tell them that Maya Rodriguez might be in danger, that her son was missing. But something held her back. Helen had been treating Eli for years, had watched the progressive failure of conventional treatments, had seen the strange test results that defied medical explanation. And she had witnessed just once something she couldn't explain, Eli feverish, during a particularly bad flare-up, causing the water in his drinking cup to move without touching it. She had dismissed it at the time as a hallucination brought on by her own exhaustion. But the memory had lingered a splinter in the smooth surface of her scientific worldview. And then there was the name Joe Blackfeather. She had heard it before in whispered conversations between Daniel Rodriguez and her former colleague, Dr. Thomas Wright, the researcher who had left abruptly 5 years ago to join a private company, Horizon Biotech. Making a decision, Helen grabbed her coat and car keys. She wasn't going to the authorities. She was going to the University Library's special collections, where she remembered seeing an anthropological study on Apache medicine men. With luck, it might mention a healer named Joe Blackfeather. As she drove through the early morning streets, Helen reflected on the oath she had taken as a doctor: first, do no harm. By keeping Maya's message to herself, was she violating that oath? Or would reporting it cause even greater harm? She didn't have answers yet, but she intended to find them wherever they might lead. In a sterile room deep within a facility labeled only as Horizon Research Campus, Victor de la Cruz lay unconscious, connected to monitors that tracked his vital signs with cold precision. Bandages covered the wounds in his shoulder and thigh, professionally dressed, but done with more efficiency than care. Agent Clark stood at the foot of the bed, speaking quietly with a man in a lab coat. "He'll live," the doctor nodded. The wounds were relatively clean, through and through on the shoulder, bullet lodged in the thigh, but successfully removed. He's sedated now, but should regain consciousness within a few hours. "Keep him under," Clark ordered. "I want him prepped for enhanced interrogation as soon as he's stable enough." The doctor frowned slightly. "Sir, the ethics protocols were suspended for this case by direct order," Clark interrupted. "This man may be the only person who knows exactly where the Rodriguez boy is. And right now, that boy is the key to everything we've been working toward for 30 years. He moved to the window, staring out at the desert that surrounded the isolated facility. "Somewhere out there is a child who can sense water through solid rock, who can potentially influence it with his mind alone. Imagine the applications, doctor. Military operations in the world's most hostile environments. Water security in an increasingly unstable climate. The power to quite literally control the most precious resource on the planet." "And his mother?" the doctor asked. "Dr. Rodriguez escaped during transport." Clark's expression hardened. "She won't get far. We've activated tracking protocols on every camera and electronic system in a 100-mile radius. And we have assets moving into position around all known associates." He smiled thinly. "Including Dr. Chen, who just made a very interesting trip to the university library." Turning back to Victor's unconscious form, Clark added, One way or another, we will find the boy. And when we do, we'll finally complete what we started with his grandfather all those years ago. Outside, the desert sun climbed higher, baking the earth with merciless heat. But deep beneath the surface, water continued to flow through hidden channels, following paths known only to the earth itself and to those rare few who could hear its whispered secrets. The hunt had begun in earnest now, and with it the race to either protect or possess an ancient power, awakening in a child caught between worlds. Back in the hidden valley, Eli sat cross-legged before Joe Blackfeather, watching intently as the old man ground starflower petals and leaves in a stone mortar. Nearby, Sophia and Maya conversed in low, urgent tones, their discussion punctuated by Maya occasionally glancing at her son with a mixture of wonder and concern. The treatment must be precise, Joe explained to Eli. Too little and the pain continues. Too much and the senses expand too rapidly, overwhelming the mind. Like turning up the volume too loud, Eli suggested. Joe smiled approvingly. Exactly so. Your father understood this balance. His modern medicines slowed the process, but without the starflower, they could only do so much. As he worked, Joe began to sing softly a melody so ancient it seemed to rise from the desert itself, words in Apache, that Eli couldn't understand, but somehow felt in his bones. The red markings on his arms tingled in response. What happens if I take the proper treatment? Eli asked. Will the markings go away? Joe shook his head. They will remain, but they will no longer bring pain. Instead, they will become a map of the water that flows beneath the earth, changing as the underground rivers change, guiding you to where you are needed. Needed for what? The old man's eyes, wise beyond their years, met Eli's directly. To heal the thirsty land, to restore balance where man has disrupted it, to be a bridge between the old knowledge and the new science. He gestured toward Maya and Sophia. Just as your mother and Dr. Reyes must now become. Eli glanced at his mother, seeing her in a new light. All his life she had been simply Mom, the person who cared for him when he was sick, who checked his homework, who made his favorite foods when he was sad. Now he realized she was so much more a scientist, a healer in her own right, someone who had worked alongside his father in ways he had never fully understood. Will the people from Horizon keep looking for us? He asked, returning his attention to Joe. The old man nodded gravely. They will never stop. What flows in your blood, what grows in this desert, these things represent power to them. And those who hunger for power are rarely satisfied until they possess all they desire. Then we can't stay here, Eli said, understanding dawning. We're putting you in danger. All life involves risk, young water finder. Joe added water to the ground herbs, creating a paste the color of sunset. But you are right. Soon you must leave this place. The desert is vast with many secrets, but Horizon has many eyes. He scooped some of the paste onto his finger, then drew a symbol on Eli's forehead, a flowing line that branched like a river delta. This is the mark of the water finder. Wear it with honor and remember your gift comes with responsibility. Nearby, Maya and Sophia's conversation grew more animated. Eli caught fragments, mentions of gene expression, environmental triggers, neurological pathways. The language of science mixing with Joe's ancient wisdom, creating something new. Spirit approached, nuzzling Eli's shoulder gently before moving to stand near Joe. The old man placed a weathered hand on the Mustang's powerful neck. The guardian has chosen you as he chose your father and grandfather before you, Joe said. This bond is sacred. Where you go, he will follow. What you face, he will face beside you. Eli reached up to touch Spirit's velvety muzzle. But what about the wild herd? Doesn't he belong with them? Some souls are born to different purposes, Joe replied. Spirit was born to stand between worlds, the wild and the tame, the past and the future. Just as you were, Shiwi. The Mustang's dark eyes seemed to confirm these words, gazing at Eli with an intelligence that transcended ordinary animal awareness. Joe finished preparing the medicine, holding out the small clay bowl to Eli. Drink. The first dose is always the most powerful. Eli hesitated, looking to his mother. Maya had paused her conversation with Sophia, watching this moment with visible apprehension. After a moment, she nodded. It's okay, mijo, she said softly. I've reviewed the compound. It's similar to what your father was developing before. before he disappeared. Taking a deep breath, Eli accepted the bowl and drank the mixture in one swift motion. The taste was bitter, yet somehow familiar, as if he had known it in some forgotten dream. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then warmth bloomed in his chest, spreading outward through his limbs like gentle fire. The red markings on his arms glowed faintly, then settled into a deeper, healthier red. The constant ache that had been his companion for years began to recede, replaced by a strange new awareness, a tingling sense of connection to the earth beneath him. "I can feel it," he whispered, eyes wide with wonder. "The water, it's everywhere, moving under us like blood in veins." Joe nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. "The medicine works. Your body accepts the change." Maya moved to kneel beside her son, her scientific skepticism warring visibly with the evidence before her eyes. "How do you feel, Eli? Any dizziness, nausea?" "I feel lighter," Eli said, struggling to find words for the sensation. "Like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time, and suddenly it's gone." He looked down at his arms, tracing the patterns with newfound appreciation. "These aren't a disease, are they? They're more like an adaptation." "Yes," Sophia confirmed, joining them. "Your grandfather James was the first in your family line to manifest these traits after his encounter with the spirit horse in Vietnam. We believe the trauma of his near-death experience, combined with exposure to certain compounds in the jungle, and his Apache genetic heritage triggered a dormant potential." "A potential for what?" Maya asked the scientist in her still seeking concrete explanations. Joe Blackfeather's answer was simple: to become what the Earth needs. In an age of drought and climate chaos, the waterfinders return. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound that was becoming all too familiar. Helicopter rotors, still far off but drawing nearer. "They're expanding their search pattern," Sophia said grimly, rising to her feet with effort. "It won't be long before they find this valley." "Then we must move," Joe decided, beginning to gather his few possessions. "There are deeper places in the desert, old places where modern eyes cannot easily follow." Maya looked torn, glancing from her son to Sophia to the approaching threat. "We can't just keep running. Horizon has resources we can't match. Eventually they'll find us." "What about Victor?" Eli asked suddenly. "Mom, Agent Clark said he was shot. Is he dead?" "I don't know, mijo," Maya admitted, pain evident in her voice. "Clark said he was alive but critically injured, being taken to a facility in Phoenix." "Which means Horizon has him," Sophia concluded. "They'll extract whatever information he has, willing or not." Eli's young face hardened with a determination beyond his years. "Then we need to rescue him." The adults exchanged glances, skeptical, concerned, evaluating. "Eli," Maya began gently, "Victor betrayed us. He was working with Horizon." "But he changed his mind," Eli insisted. "He could have let them take me, but instead he helped me escape. He stood against them with just a pistol against a helicopter." His voice cracked slightly. "He told me to tell you he was sorry. For everything." Maya's expression softened, complex emotions playing across her face. Despite everything Victor had been, her husband had been part of their lives for 5 years. And in the end, it seemed he had chosen to protect her son at the cost of his own safety. "Even if we wanted to rescue him," Sophia pointed out, "Horizon's facility is one of the most secure installations in the Southwest. It would be impossible to breach. Unless," Joe said thoughtfully, "one had the ability to sense and manipulate the water systems within the facility." He looked meaningfully at Eli. "With proper preparation, the young waterfinder's gifts might be key to such an endeavor." "No," Maya said immediately, maternal protectiveness overriding all other considerations. "It's too dangerous. Eli's just a child." "A child with extraordinary abilities," Joe countered gently. "Abilities that are now awakening fully thanks to the proper medicine." Eli stood up, his posture straighter than before, the red markings on his arms now pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Mom, I need to do this. Not just for Victor, but for Dad, too. To finish what he started." The helicopter sound grew marginally louder. Time was running short. Sophia placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "We need a safe place to plan to prepare. If Eli's abilities continue to develop as they should, and if we can combine your scientific knowledge with Joe's traditional wisdom, we might have a chance." Maya finished, still looking unconvinced but beginning to consider the possibility. Joe Blackfeather whistled softly, a complex pattern of notes that carried across the valley. In response, the wild horses began to gather, moving toward the small group with purpose. "The desert has many secrets," the old man said, his eyes twinkling with ancient knowledge. "And I know them all. Come, Waterfinder family. It is time to disappear like the rain into the sand, present everywhere, visible nowhere." As they mounted the waiting horses, Eli on Spirit, Maya and Sophia on two gentle mares, Joe on a sturdy paint, the helicopter crested the distant ridge, a black mechanical insect against the vast blue sky. But by the time it reached the valley, all that remained of the camp was a coal fire pit and hoof prints that led in every direction, before mysteriously vanishing, as if the horses had taken flight or been swallowed by the earth itself. The desert kept its secrets, and somewhere within its vast expanse, a boy with fire on his skin and water in his veins began to understand the power that had always been his birthright and the responsibility that came with it. The hunt continued, but now the hunted were becoming hunters in their own right, and nature itself seemed to be taking sides in the coming confrontation. Twilight painted the desert in shades of purple and gold as three riders followed a narrow path between towering mesas. They moved in silence, the only sounds the steady rhythm of hoofbeats and the occasional call of a desert nighthawk. At the lead rode Joe Blackfeather, his ancient face impassive, as he guided them deeper into a landscape few outsiders had ever seen. Behind him, Maya and Sophia rode side by side, both women lost in thought. Eli rode with Maya nestled in front of her, on the mare's back, his small frame occasionally leaning into his mother's embrace as fatigue overtook him. Spirit trotted alongside them, no longer carrying a rider, but serving as scout and guardian, occasionally ranging ahead to check the path before returning to the group. The Mustang moved with purpose, his dark coat blending with the gathering shadows. "How much farther?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Joe glanced back, the eagle feathers in his braided hair catching the last light of day. "Not far. The place of ancestors lies beyond the next ridge." Eli stirred, rousing from his half-sleep. The red markings on his arms glowed faintly in the twilight, pulsing with a gentle rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Since taking the starflower medicine that morning, the constant pain that had been his companion for years had receded, replaced by a strange new awareness that ebbed and flowed like water. "I can feel it," he murmured, eyes half closed. "There's water ahead, a lot of it, hidden deep." Joe nodded, unsurprised. "The ancient ones built their dwelling where two underground rivers meet. It has remained secret for centuries because its water never reaches the surface." They crested the ridge as the first stars appeared in the eastern sky. Below them stretched a narrow canyon, its walls decorated with faint pictographs visible even in the fading light. At the canyon's heart stood an impossibly intact stone structure, a circular building nestled against the cliff face, its masonry exhibiting craftsmanship that had withstood centuries of desert winds. "The Nightwater Kiva," Joe announced with reverence, "built by the ancestors when the desert was young." They descended carefully, the horses picking their way down the steep trail with practiced ease. As they approached the ancient structure, Eli felt the sensation of water growing stronger, a pulsing awareness that seemed to emanate from deep beneath the stone building. "The rivers are right under us," he said with certainty. "One flows from the north, one from the east. They meet directly beneath the kiva." Joe dismounted with surprising agility for his age, helping Sophia down from her horse. The kiva was built as a place of communion between the people and the water spirits. Here the ancient water finders would gather to share knowledge and prepare their medicines. Inside, the circular chamber was larger than it appeared from outside. Moonlight filtered through a smoke hole in the center of the roof, illuminating walls covered with intricate paintings depicting humans, with flame-like markings communing with animals and water sources. The floor was swept clean with a central fire pit surrounded by smooth stones, worn from centuries of use. "We will be safe here," Joe assured them, beginning to arrange firewood from a neatly stacked pile near the entrance. "No modern technology can detect this place. The walls contain minerals that block electronic signals, and the water below creates distortions that confuse aerial imaging." As the fire bloomed to life, casting warm light throughout the chamber, the full extent of the ancient artwork became visible. Eli moved slowly around the perimeter, studying the images with growing wonder. Many depicted horses with humans, bearing markings similar to his own. In one particularly detailed scene, a horse with a crescent-shaped mark led a group of waterfinders to what appeared to be a hidden spring. "Spirit," Eli whispered, touching the painted horse gently. Maya joined him, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with what she understood about history. These paintings must be hundreds of years old, but they show the same markings, the same relationship with horses that we're experiencing now. The gift has appeared throughout time. Joe confirmed, carefully unpacking herbs and supplies from his saddlebags, sometimes skipping many generations, sometimes flowing strongly through several in succession, always when the earth has greatest need. Sophia settled near the fire, her movements stiff with the pain of her condition. The red markings on her arms had darkened over the course of the day, spreading further across her skin. And now the earth has great need indeed. Climate change, drought, water scarcity, conditions that threaten millions. Which is why Horizon wants to weaponize the ability, Maya concluded grimly. Control water, control the world. Joe nodded solemnly. The ancient ones foresaw this time. They called it the Great Thirst, when the balance between taking and giving would be broken, when the waters would retreat from human reach. He gestured to a section of wall where the paintings depicted drought and suffering. But they also foresaw the return of the waterfinders, children born with the old gift, bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and new knowledge. Eli touched his own arms, tracing the patterns that matched those in the ancient artwork. But I'm just one kid. What difference can I make against something as big as climate change? Perhaps more than you imagine, Sophia said, leaning forward with academic interest despite her discomfort. If your ability to sense water could be documented scientifically combined with modern hydrology and environmental engineering, we could locate underground aquifers that modern technology misses. Maya continued, her mind racing with possibilities. Identify sustainable water sources, develop better conservation methods. But first, Joe interjected gently, the young water finder must master his gift. And to do that, he needs time and safety, neither of which Horizon will allow if they capture him. The mention of Horizon brought them back to their immediate crisis. Maya's expression hardened with resolve. So we need to rescue Victor, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because as long as Horizon has him, they have leverage over us. Sophia opened Daniel's journal, which she had kept close throughout their journey. Daniel suspected there were others at Horizon who were uncomfortable with the direction of their research, people who might help us if approached correctly. Dr. Thomas Wright, Maya said suddenly. He worked with Daniel at the university before suddenly accepting a position at Horizon 5 years ago. He always seemed troubled about the move. Sophia nodded. Daniel mentioned him in his notes. He believed Wright was placed at Horizon to monitor their research, but that he might be sympathetic to their ethical concerns. How do we contact him? Eli asked, practical, despite his age. That, said Joe with a small smile, is where your friend Dr. Chen may prove invaluable. Helen Chen sat alone in her office at Phoenix Children's Hospital, staring at the screen of her laptop. The journal article displayed there, Traditional Water-Finding Techniques Among Apache Healers, contained a brief mention of one Joseph Blackfeather, described as perhaps the last living practitioner of the ancient water-finding ceremonies. The accompanying photograph, though decades old, showed a younger version of a man whose eyes held the same ageless wisdom she had glimpsed in Eli Rodriguez during his most lucid moments. Her phone rang, startling her from her contemplation. The number was blocked. Dr. Chen, she answered cautiously. Helen, it's Maya Rodriguez. Helen nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Maya, where are you? Are you safe? The authorities are looking everywhere for you and Eli. We're safe, Maya assured her, though her voice sounded distant, the connection poor. But we need your help. It's about Eli's condition and Victor. I got your message about Horizon, Helen said, lowering her voice despite being alone. I've been researching. There's something strange going on with that company. They've been involved in classified water security projects for decades, And they have connections to military research that go back to the Vietnam era. It goes deeper than that, Maya replied. They've been studying my family for generations. Eli's condition isn't just a rare autoimmune disorder, it's something else entirely. Something they want to control. Helen glanced at the article on her screen, making connections she would have dismissed as fantasy just days earlier. The water-finding abilities, the Apache traditions. It's all connected, isn't it? Yes, and we need your help to contact someone inside Horizon, a Dr. Thomas Wright. He worked with Daniel years ago. Helen hesitated only briefly. Her career had been dedicated to helping children like Eli to finding answers where traditional medicine failed. If this was where the answers lay, what do you need me to do? Dr. Thomas Wright moved through the sterile corridors of Horizon's research facility with practiced efficiency, his lab coat and security badge marking him as belonging. But the tension in his shoulders, the watchful calculation in his eyes revealed a man playing a part rather than living it. He paused outside a secure door marked Rehabilitation Unit 3, swiped his badge and entered. Inside, Victor Dela Cruz lay handcuffed to a hospital bed, monitoring equipment tracking his vital signs. The wounds in his shoulder and thigh were professionally dressed, but the bruising on his face was fresh evidence of enhanced interrogation techniques that officially didn't exist in American facilities. Dr. Wright, Victor acknowledged, his voice hoarse. Come to ask more questions. Wright glanced at the camera in the corner of the room, then made a show of checking Victor's bandages. Under the pretense of examining the wound, he leaned close and whispered. Dr. Chen reached out. Maya and Eli are safe. They're coming for you. Victor's expression remained carefully neutral, but his eyes widened slightly. That would be extremely unwise. Wright straightened, speaking normally again. The shoulder wound is healing well. The tissue damage in the thigh is more extensive, but with proper care, you should regain full mobility. He made notes on the tablet he carried, then added in a whisper. 3 days. Be ready. As Wright left the room, he nodded professionally to the guard stationed outside. His heart hammered in his chest, but his face betrayed nothing. 20 years in covert operations had taught him to compartmentalize to play the long game. He had joined Horizon 2 decades ago, assigned by a government oversight committee to monitor their classified research. What he had discovered, experiments on unwitting subjects, the targeting of specific genetic lineages, the weaponization of natural abilities had horrified him. But he had maintained his cover-gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. The Rodriguez boy might finally provide that moment. If Wright could help Maya expose Horizon's illegal activities while protecting her son from exploitation, decades of ethical compromises might finally be redeemed. He just had to stay alive long enough to see it through. In the Nightwater Kiva, Eli sat cross-legged in the center of the ancient chamber, eyes closed in concentration. Around him, small vessels of water had been arranged in a circular pattern. Joe Blackfeather sat directly across from him, guiding the boy through a series of breathing exercises. Feel the water, the old man instructed softly. Not with your hands or eyes, but with the part of you that dreams, that knows things without being told. Eli's brow furrowed with effort. The red markings on his arms pulsed gently, glowing faintly in the dim light of the kiva. It's like singing, he said finally. Each water vessel has its own sound, but they're all connected like different notes in the same song. Joe nodded approvingly. The ancestors called it the water's voice. Listen deeply and soon you will understand not just where water is, but what it needs, what it can become. Maya watched from the edge of the chamber, her scientific mind both skeptical and fascinated. Beside her, Sophia made careful notes in Daniel's journal, documenting Eli's progress with the precision of a lifetime researcher. His sensitivity is increasing exponentially, Sophia murmured, far faster than either James or Daniel. The starflower treatment seems to be catalyzing abilities that might otherwise have taken years to develop. Is it dangerous? Maya asked, maternal concern evident in her voice. Not with proper guidance, Sophia assured her. The treatment creates a balance, accelerating the development of abilities while protecting the nervous system from overload. She hesitated, then added, But there's something else happening too, something I don't fully understand. The connection between Eli and Spirit seems to be amplifying his abilities somehow. As if summoned by his name, Spirit appeared at the Kiva entrance. The Mustang had been patrolling the perimeter of the canyon, vigilant for any sign of pursuit. Now he entered the ancient structure, moving with deliberate steps until he stood directly behind Eli. The boy, still deep in concentration, seemed unaware of the horse's presence. But as Spirit lowered his head until it nearly touched Eli's shoulder, the water in the vessels around them began to move, subtle ripples spreading across surfaces that should have been still in the windless chamber. Remarkable, Sophia breathed frantically, recording her observations. It's as if they're creating some kind of resonance field together. Joe watched with serene acceptance. The Guardian amplifies the Seeker. It has always been so. Eli's eyes suddenly opened wide with wonder. I can see them, he whispered. All the water passed for miles and miles, like glowing rivers under the ground. His gaze found Maya. Mom, I can see the facility where they're holding Victor. It's built over an ancient waterway. The water remembers everything that happens above it. Maya moved to her son's side, both awed and concerned by this development. What else can you see, mijo? People, guards, scientists. Eli's eyes took on a distant quality, as if viewing scenes invisible to others. And Victor, he's hurt but alive. They've been questioning him, trying to make him tell them where we are. Has he told them? Sophia asked urgently. Eli shook his head slowly. No, he's protecting us. But they're getting impatient. Joe rose to his feet with the fluid grace that belied his years. The water-finder's sight has awakened. Now we must move quickly. The stars align in 3 days for the healing ceremony that will complete your transformation, young Eli. Before then, we must free the captive and prepare for what comes after. 3 days, Maya repeated, determination settling over her features. Then we have planning to do. Agent Clark stood in Horizon's surveillance center, surrounded by monitors displaying satellite imagery, drone feeds, and data from ground sensors scattered throughout the desert. Despite the array of cutting-edge technology, the screens showed nothing but empty landscape, ancient rock formations, and the occasional wildlife. How is it possible, he demanded of the technicians, that a woman, an elderly man, a child, and a scientist, all on horseback, have simply vanished into thin air? The lead technician shook his head helplessly. Sir, we've deployed every resource. Thermal imaging, signal tracking pattern, recognition software. It's as if they've gone somewhere our technology simply can't see. Clark's jaw tightened with frustration. No one disappears completely. Expand the search radius. I want drones over every inch of the Painted Rock Desert by morning. As the technicians hurried to comply, Clark's phone vibrated with a secure message. The text was brief but sent a chill through him despite the climate-controlled environment. Oversight Committee requesting update on Rodriguez situation. Chairman arriving tomorrow for personal briefing. Clark swore under his breath. The Oversight Committee was supposed to be a formality, a rubber stamp for Horizon's classified work. That the chairman would personally intervene suggested serious concerns at the highest levels. He exited the surveillance center, moving swiftly to his office where he placed a call on a secure line. We have a problem, he said without preamble when the call was answered. The committee is sending Richardson himself. The voice that responded was cool, measured. Then you need results before he arrives. Use Dela Cruz. Apply maximum pressure. We've been interrogating him for 2 days. If he knew where they were, he would have broken by now. Then he's outlived his usefulness, came the chilling reply. Extract any final data, then proceed with terminal protocols. We can't risk him speaking to the committee. Clark hesitated, then gave a curt acknowledgement before ending the call. For a moment, he stood motionless in his office, confronting a line he had never quite crossed in his 20-year career at Horizon. Then, decision made, he headed toward Rehabilitation Unit 3. Some sacrifices were necessary for the greater good. History would vindicate their work when Horizon controlled the world's water resources. Or so he told himself, as he walked briskly down the sterile corridor, readying himself to order a man's execution. Dawn painted the desert with golden light as 3 riders approached the outskirts of Phoenix. They kept to arroyos and dry washes, avoiding main roads, in open ground where surveillance might spot them. Joe Blackfeather had remained behind at the Nightwater Kiva, continuing Eli's training, while the others implemented the first phase of their plan. Maya rode in the lead, her face set with determination. Behind her, Sophia and Dr. Helen Chen shared a horse, the older woman's condition requiring the support of the younger doctor. Spirit ran alongside them, no longer carrying a rider, but serving as scout and guardian. The rendezvous point is just ahead, Helen said, pointing to a cluster of abandoned buildings at the edge of an old industrial park. Dr. Wright said he'd meet us there at sunrise. They approached, cautiously alert for any sign of surveillance or ambush. The complex appeared deserted, windows broken, and walls covered with graffiti, a relic of economic dreams abandoned decades ago. As they neared the largest building, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and the careful movements of someone accustomed to watching his back. Dr. Thomas Wright had aged since Maya had last seen him, lines of stress etched deeply around his eyes and mouth. Maya, he acknowledged with a terse nod. His gaze shifted to Spirit, widening with recognition. The Mustang. Daniel told me about him, but I never quite believed. Believe it, Maya replied, dismounting smoothly. Everything Daniel theorized was true. The abilities, the connection to the horses, all of it. Wright's attention moved to Sophia. Dr. Reyes, you've been officially dead for 5 years. Horizon has a whole file on your unfortunate accident in the desert. Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated, Sophia said dryly as Helen helped her down from the horse. Though not entirely inaccurate, as you can see. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing the extensive red markings that now covered most of her arm. Wright nodded grimly. The Rodriguez syndrome. You self-administered the treatment Daniel was developing, didn't you? Someone had to continue his work after Horizon arranged his accident, Sophia replied, her voice hardening, just as they tried to eliminate James Rodriguez 30 years earlier. I didn't know the full extent when I was assigned to Horizon, Wright said, regret evident in his voice. By the time I understood what they were doing, the targeting of specific genetic lineages, the weaponization research, I was in too deep to simply walk away. But now you're helping us, Maya said, studying him carefully. Why the change of heart? Wright's expression darkened. They're planning to terminate Victor tomorrow morning. After extracting final data samples, of course. Clark received pressure from above, something about an oversight committee investigation. They're tying up loose ends. Maya's face paled. Despite the complicated history with her second husband, the thought of his execution struck her deeply. Then we move tonight as planned. It won't be easy, Wright warned. Security has been doubled since Eli disappeared. They're expecting some kind of rescue attempt. What they're not expecting, Sophia interjected, is what Eli can do now. Or rather, what he and Spirit can do together. Wright looked skeptical. The boy is miles away, safely hidden with Joe Blackfeather. How can he help from there? Maya and Sophia exchanged knowing glances. Distance, Maya explained, is becoming less relevant to my son's abilities. In the ancient Kiva, Eli sat cross-legged before a shallow clay bowl filled with water collected from the underground rivers. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady and controlled. The red markings on his arms glowed with subtle energy, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Joe Blackfeather sat opposite him, softly chanting in Apache, occasionally adding pinches of herbs to small fires burning in a circle around them. The smoke curled upward, carrying scents of sage juniper and the distinctive sweet, sharp aroma of the starflower. See through the water's memory, Joe instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. All water is connected. What flows beneath the Horizon facility once flowed here through this very Kiva. The water remembers. It can show you. Eli's consciousness expanded, following the ancient waterways that network beneath the desert like living veins. He sensed the cool darkness of underground rivers, the quiet persistence of their flow through millennia of stone. Then gradually he became aware of human structures above pipes, foundations, buildings. The Horizon facility materialized in his mind's eye, its layout becoming clear as he followed the water systems that serviced it. Security checkpoints, laboratories, power systems, and at its heart, the detention area where Victor was being held. I can see it all, he murmured, his voice distant even to his own ears. Every pipe, every valve, every water source. Good, Joe said approvingly. Now remember what we practiced. Reach out to those who help us. Eli extended his awareness further, seeking the unique resonance he had come to associate with spirit. The connection between them had strengthened, daily evolving into something beyond ordinary human-animal bonds. Through it, he could now share not just emotions, but images, intentions. Spirit, he called silently, I need you. Miles away, the Mustang raised his head sharply, ears pricked forward. Those watching, Maya, Sophia, Helen, and Wright, saw the horse's eyes seem to unfocus, as if seeing something beyond the physical world around them. It's happening, Sophia whispered, her scientific mind struggling to categorize what she was witnessing. The connection is active. Through this bond, Eli transmitted what he had seen the facility lay out, the security systems, the water infrastructure that might be manipulated. He felt spirit receive this knowledge, felt the Mustang's determination surge in response. Then, pushing his developing abilities further than ever before, Eli attempted something new, extending his awareness to include his mother. It was harder, the connection less natural than with spirit, but after several strained moments, he felt the link establish. Mom, he projected, hoping his thoughts would reach her. I can see the way in, through the water systems, the old drainage tunnels. Miles away, Maya gasped, her hand flying to her temple as images flooded her mind. Blueprints essentially showing a network of maintenance tunnels beneath the Horizon facility. Eli, she whispered aloud. He's showing us the way in, Sophia realized, watching Maya's expression. Through him, spirit is guiding us. Wright stared in amazement. That's impossible. And yet it's happening, Helen observed clinically, though awe tinged her voice. Everything we thought we understood about the human brain, about consciousness itself, we can philosophize later, Maya interrupted, focus returning to her eyes. Eli's showing us a maintenance entrance on the facility's east side. Drainage tunnels from when the site was first built, now used for emergency water control. Most of the electronic security is focused on the main entrances and perimeter. Wright nodded slowly, processing this information. Those tunnels would be in the oldest section built before my time. They might not even appear on current security protocols. Then that's our way in, Maya decided. Tonight, when the facility shifts to minimal staffing. As the group finalized their plans, Spirit remained motionless. Eyes distant, the living conduit between a boy with emerging powers and those who would risk everything to protect him and to stop an organization that had pursued his family for generations. Night fell over the desert like a velvet curtain, stars emerging in brilliant profusion above the Horizon facility. The research complex sat isolated amidst the vastness, its modern architecture and security perimeter, incongruous against the ancient landscape. In the darkness beyond the perimeter lights, 4 figures moved with careful precision toward a drainage culvert, half hidden by desert scrub. Maya led the way, followed by Sophia, leaning heavily on Helen for support. Wright brought up the rear, constantly scanning for security patrols. Spirit had separated from them earlier, heading toward the facility's main entrance, in what would soon become a critical diversion. Here, Maya whispered, locating the maintenance access Eli had shown her in their mental connection. The heavy grate covering the tunnel entrance appeared rusted in place, undisturbed for years. Wright examined it skeptically. Even if we could open it, the tunnel might be collapsed inside. These were built decades ago. It's intact, Maya said with quiet certainty. Eli showed me. The water still flows through here underneath the facility. Together, Wright and Maya managed to pry the grate loose, revealing a dark tunnel large enough for them to enter in a crouching position. The smell of damp earth and stagnant water wafted out. I'll go first, Wright volunteered, switching on a small tactical flashlight. They entered single file, splashing through shallow water that flowed sluggishly along the tunnel floor. The passage sloped gradually upward, leading toward the facility's foundation. After several hundred yards, they reached a junction where newer concrete sections had been added to the original stonework. We're under the facility now, Wright confirmed, consulting a small device that displayed their position relative to the building above. According to this, we're directly beneath the east wing, mostly storage and maintenance. Less security than the research sections. How far to the detention area, Maya asked. 2 levels up and west through the main corridor. Heaviest security in the facility. Sophia, her breathing labored from the difficult journey, leaned against the tunnel wall. This is where we separate as planned. Dr. Chen and I will access the research databases from the East Wing terminals. You and Maya continue to the detention area. Maya nodded, though concern showed in her eyes. Be careful. If you're discovered, we'll be fine, Helen assured her. Most security personnel will be focused on the disturbance Spirit is about to create. The databases are our priority. Without evidence of what Horizon has been doing, freeing Victor accomplishes little in the long term. They found a maintenance ladder leading upward to a service corridor, and the group split as planned. Maya and Wright headed west toward the detention area, while Sophia and Helen made their way to the research section. As they moved through the dimly lit service corridors, Maya felt a familiar presence touch her mind. Eli reaching out across the miles, monitoring their progress through his connection with the facility's water systems. He's with us, she whispered to Wright. Guiding us. Wright shook his head in amazement. If Daniel could see what his son has become, he'd be proud. Maya finished, her voice catching slightly. But also terrified for him. The responsibility is too much for an 8-year-old. Children adapt better than adults to extraordinary circumstances, Wright observed, and Eli has you and Spirit to guide him. They reached a security door that required badge access. Wright swiped his card, tension evident in his posture, until the light flashed green and the lock disengaged. So far, so good, he murmured. My credentials still work. As they slipped through, an alarm suddenly blared from the direction of the main entrance. Spirit's diversion beginning right on schedule. The Mustang, according to their plan, would approach the main gate, directly triggering perimeter sensors and drawing security personnel away from the interior. Now we move quickly, Wright urged, leading Maya through a series of corridors that grew progressively more clinical in appearance. They encountered few staff members, most having responded to the perimeter alarm. Those they did see paid little attention to Wright in his lab coat and Maya, whom he escorted as if she were an authorized visitor. Finally, they reached the door marked Rehabilitation Unit 3. Wright swiped his badge, then entered a code on the keypad beside it. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Inside, Victor lay handcuffed to a hospital bed, monitoring equipment, tracking his vital signs. His face was bruised, evidence of harsh interrogation, but his eyes widened with recognition as Maya entered. Maya, he croaked, disbelief evident in his voice. You shouldn't be here. It's a trap. Too late, Maya registered movement behind them. She turned to see Wright holding a small pistol, his expression unreadable. I'm sorry, he said quietly. They have my family. From the shadows stepped Agent Clark, his own weapon drawn. Dr. Rodriguez, how kind of you to join us. Now perhaps you'd like to tell us where your son is currently located. In the Nightwater Kiva, Eli's eyes flew open, his connection with his mother suddenly flooded with alarm and betrayal. They've been caught, he gasped to Joe Blackfeather. Wright betrayed them. They have Mom. The old man's weathered face remained calm, though concern showed in his eyes. What of Spirit? Can you still sense him? Eli closed his eyes again, reaching out along the bond that connected him to the Mustang. Yes, he's still free, creating the diversion at the main entrance. Then all is not lost, Joe said, rising to his feet with fluid grace. The time has come for you to use what you have learned, not just to sense the water, but to speak to it, to ask for its help. Eli looked uncertain. But we've only practiced small movements, ripples and bowls, droplets rising and falling. The facility's water systems are huge, complex. Size matters not to the water, Joe said, his voice taking on the cadence of ancient teaching. A drop or an ocean, it responds to the same call. But you must be precise in your asking, clear in your intention. Eli nodded, determination replacing fear on his young face. He settled back into his meditative posture, hands resting on his knees, and closed his eyes. The red markings on his arms began to glow more intensely as he reached out with his consciousness, following the waterways beneath the desert to the Horizon facility. He found the main water supply lines, first massive pipes carrying thousands of gallons to various sections of the complex. Then, with growing confidence, he traced the smaller lines, the distribution network that fed each room, each system. Finally, he located his mother, her presence a bright point of familiar energy in his awareness. She was in a room with three others, Victor Wright and a man Eli didn't recognize, but whose cold energy marked him as a threat. With delicate precision, Eli focused on the sprinkler system directly above that room. The water waited there, passive, controlled by electronic sensors designed to activate only in case of fire. But water, as Joe had taught him, remembered a time before human control when it answered to older forces. "Help us," Eli whispered to the waiting water. "Please." Miles away in Rehabilitation Unit 3, the first sign that something was wrong came as a subtle vibration in the pipes running through the ceiling. Clark was in mid-sentence threatening Maya with increasingly graphic descriptions of what would happen if she didn't cooperate when a single drop of water fell from the sprinkler head directly above him. He glanced up, momentarily distracted. That was all the opening Victor needed. Despite his injuries and restraints, Victor launched himself sideways with explosive force, toppling the hospital bed and creating a barrier between Maya and the two armed men. "Run!" he shouted to her. In the same instant, the sprinkler system erupted, not with the usual steady spray, but with a directed torrent that slammed into Clark and Wright, with fire hose force knocking them off their feet. The water seemed to move with purpose, avoiding Maya and Victor while targeting their captors. Maya didn't waste the opportunity. She lunged forward, grabbing Clark's dropped weapon, then began working to free Victor from his restraints. "How?" Victor gasped as the handcuff released. "Eli," Maya answered simply. "He's controlling the water somehow. Come on." Supporting Victor, who was weak from days of captivity and interrogation, Maya headed for the door. The corridor outside was in chaos. Sprinklers throughout the facility had activated, but in a selective pattern that suggested intelligence rather than malfunction. Security personnel slipped on suddenly wet floors or found themselves fighting inexplicable currents that pushed them away from certain areas. The East Wing, Maya decided, remembering their original plan. "We need to find Sophia and Helen." They made their way through the confusion, the water systems continuing to work in their favor, doors that should have been locked sliding open as water shorted control panels in precise ways, elevators stopping at convenient moments. In the research section, they found Sophia and Helen frantically downloading files from a terminal, oblivious to the chaos elsewhere in the facility. "We've got it," Helen announced triumphantly as they entered. "Everything the Vietnam experiments on. James, the monitoring of Daniel, the plans for weaponizing the water-finding ability. Decades of illegal research, all documented." "We need to move," Maya urged, indicating Victor's weakened condition. "The water diversion won't last forever, and when it stops, security will lock this place down completely." As they hurried toward the maintenance access they had used to enter, a new sound reached them, the distinctive whining of a horse impossibly close. Following the sound, they found Spirit waiting at an emergency exit, pawing impatiently at the ground. "He's leading us out a different way," Maya realized. They followed the Mustang, who seemed to know exactly where to go to avoid security patrols. The horse led them to a loading dock on the facility's north side, where the perimeter fence had been damaged, whether by Spirit himself or by the increasingly erratic behavior of the facility's water systems. It wasn't clear. They slipped through the gap, Maya and Helen supporting Victor between them, Sophia following with effort. Beyond the fence, three horses waited, the same ones that had brought them to the facility. "Eli thought of everything," Sophia said with weary amazement as Helen helped her mount. "Not Eli alone," Maya corrected, glancing at Spirit, who stood alert, watching the facility behind them. "His partner had something to do with it too." They rode away from Horizon at a careful pace, mindful of Victor's injuries and Sophia's condition. Behind them, emergency lights flashed as the facility struggled to contain the inexplicable cascading failures of its water systems. "Where to now?" Victor asked weakly from where he rode with Maya. "Home," she answered simply. "The real home of the Waterfinders, where Eli is waiting for us." In the Nightwater Kiva, Eli slowly opened his eyes, exhaustion etched on his young face. Maintaining control over such complex water systems at such distance had drained him more than he had anticipated. "They're safe," he told Joe Blackfeather, relief evident in his voice. "All of them. Spirit is leading them here." Joe nodded approvingly. "You have done well, young Waterfinder. Few of your ancestors could have managed such a feat so early in their awakening. Eli's hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline faded, leaving fatigue in its wake. The red markings on his arms had deepened to a rich crimson, no longer resembling inflammation, but rather intricate patterns that might have been deliberately applied. "What happens now?" he asked suddenly, sounding like the 8-year-old boy he still was beneath his extraordinary abilities. Joe settled beside him, placing a weathered hand on his shoulder. "Now we prepare for the healing ceremony. The stars align tomorrow night, and your transformation will be completed." "Will it hurt?" "There is always some pain in becoming," Joe answered honestly, "but not like before. This pain has purpose, has meaning, and when it passes, you will be whole in a way few humans ever experience." Eli nodded, accepting this truth with the resilience of youth. "And after that, what do I do with all of this?" He gestured to his arms, to the water vessels surrounding them, to the ancient kiva itself. "That," said Joe with gentle wisdom, "will be for you to decide. The gift comes with responsibility, but not with detailed instructions." His eyes twinkled with unexpected humor. Even the ancestors understood that each generation must find its own path. Eli smiled, then yawned widely. The events of the day had pushed his developing abilities to their limits. "Rest now," Joe encouraged. "Dream of water and horses. Tomorrow brings your family home, and with them the beginning of a new chapter for the Waterfinders." As Eli drifted towards sleep, his consciousness brushed against spirits, once more feeling the Mustang's pride and satisfaction as he guided the rescued humans through the desert night. The bond between them hummed with shared purpose, with a connection that transcended ordinary understanding. In that moment of quiet communion, Eli glimpsed possibilities stretching before him, like the desert horizon, vast, challenging, but filled with hope. The Waterfinder's path would not be easy, but he would not walk it alone. Dawn painted the canyon in hues of gold and rose as 4 riders approached the Nightwater Kiva. Maya led the way, her face reflecting both exhaustion and determination. Behind her, Helen supported Sophia, while Victor, still weak but improving, rode the 3rd horse. Spirit trotted alongside, occasionally ranging ahead, as if impatient for their arrival. Eli emerged from the kiva as they approached, his small figure silhouetted against the ancient stone structure. For a moment he stood motionless, then broke into a run, racing toward his mother with the uncomplicated joy of a child reunited with his parent. Maya dismounted quickly, catching him in a fierce embrace. "Eli, oh mijo, what you did, it was incredible." "I was so scared," he admitted, his face pressed against her shoulder, "when I felt them capture you." "But you didn't panic," she said, pulling back to look at him with pride. "You used your abilities exactly when they were needed most." Victor approached slowly, his movements stiff with pain, but his eyes clear. He knelt awkwardly before Eli, wincing as the motion pulled at his injuries. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for everything, for working with Horizon, for taking you into the desert that day." He swallowed hard. "Your father would be ashamed of what I became." Eli studied him for a moment, then stepped forward and hugged him gently, mindful of his wounds. "Dad would be proud of what you did at the end. You protected me. You stood up to them." Victor's composure broke at these words, tears streaming down his face as he returned the boy's embrace. Joe Blackfeather emerged from the kiva, observing the reunion with quiet satisfaction. "The circle begins to close," he said cryptically, "but one task remains." He gestured to the kiva entrance, where arrangements for the healing ceremony were already prepared. A central fire pit surrounded by symbols drawn in colored sand vessels of water, placed at cardinal points, and the distinctive star-shaped flowers, arranged in patterns that echoed the markings on Eli's arms. "Tonight, when the stars align, the young Waterfinder completes his awakening," Joe announced, "and with it perhaps begins the healing of wounds far older and deeper than any we carry individually." As the day progressed, preparations continued. Helen examined Victor's injuries with professional efficiency, changing bandages and administering antibiotics from supplies Joe had somehow produced. Sophia and Maya worked together, integrating the stolen Horizon data with Daniel's research notes, creating a comprehensive record of both the science and the crimes. Eli spent the day with Joe, absorbing final teachings, practicing the control of his abilities with growing confidence. Spirit remained close to the boy, the bond between them visibly strengthening as Eli's transformation progressed. By sunset, the canyon glowed with golden light, and a sense of anticipation filled the air. The group gathered in the kiva, forming a circle around the central fire pit, where Joe had built a small, carefully structured arrangement of wood. The ceremony is ancient, the old man explained, but its purpose is renewal. What happens tonight has occurred many times across centuries whenever the gift passed to a new generation. Eli sat cross-legged at the center of the circle, dressed in a simple white cotton shirt and pants that Joe had provided. The red markings on his arms now extended across his shoulders and chest in intricate patterns that seemed almost deliberately applied rather than symptoms of a condition. Joe began to chant in Apache, his voice carrying the weight of generations. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above the kiva's smoke hole, he lit the central fire, which blazed up with unusual colors, blues and greens mingling with the normal orange flames. The air in the kiva seemed to thicken, to vibrate with energy that transcended ordinary perception. The water in the ceremonial vessels began to move of its own accord, rippling in rhythm with Joe's chanting and with Eli's heartbeat. Spirit, who had been standing quietly at the edge of the circle, suddenly stepped forward, approaching Eli with deliberate steps. The Mustang lowered his head until his muzzle nearly touched the boy's forehead. "The Guardian acknowledges the water finder," Joe intoned, "as it was in the beginning, as it will be beyond our time." Eli reached up, placing his hand on Spirit's neck. The instant they touched the markings on Eli's skin, began to glow with inner light, pulsing in time with the Mustang's heartbeat. The boy gasped, his back arching as energy visibly flowed between them. For a moment that seemed suspended outside of ordinary time, horse and boy were connected by visible strands of energy glowing with the same reddish light as Eli's markings. Then with a final surge that illuminated the entire kiva, the energy dissipated. Eli slumped forward, caught gently by his mother who had moved to his side. When he opened his eyes, they held a new awareness, a depth that hadn't been there before. "The water," he whispered. "I can hear all of it, everywhere." Joe nodded, satisfaction evident in his weathered features. "The transformation is complete. The water finder is awakened." Maya helped her son to his feet and the others gathered around them. The markings on Eli's skin had settled into their final form, no longer angry red inflammation, but rather a deep russet pattern that resembled the natural markings of certain animals, or perhaps the branching patterns of rivers seen from above. "What now?" Helen asked the scientist in her, still struggling to categorize what she had witnessed. "Now," said Sophia, "we use what we've learned, both the ancient wisdom and the modern science, to protect children like Eli and to heal the thirsty earth." "Horizon won't stop looking for us," Victor warned. "What we stole, what Eli can do, they'll never give up on acquiring those things." "Perhaps," Joe acknowledged, "but they face a more immediate problem. The Oversight Committee chairman who arrived today will find extensive evidence of illegal human experimentation, environmental violations, and corporate espionage." His eyes twinkled with mischief that belied his age. "Anonymous sources have provided similar evidence to several major news organizations." Maya looked at him with new respect. "You've been planning this for a long time. Since James Rodriguez returned from Vietnam with a story about a horse that couldn't possibly have been there?" Joe confirmed. "Some journeys span generations before reaching their destination." As they emerged from the kiva into the star-filled desert night, a sense of completion settled over the group. The crisis wasn't fully resolved. There would be investigations, explanations, decisions about how to proceed with the knowledge they had gained. But the immediate danger had passed, and with it, a chapter in the Rodriguez family history had closed. Spirit stood at the edge of the canyon, looking out over the vast desert that stretched to the horizon. Eli moved to stand beside him, placing a hand on the Mustang's neck in a gesture that had become natural. "He's hearing them," Eli said quietly to his mother who had followed. "The wild herd. They're calling him." Maya felt a pang of sadness. "Will he go back to them?" Eli smiled wisdom beyond his years in his expression. "He'll go between worlds like Joe said. Sometimes with the herd, sometimes with us. Spirit was never meant to be owned, just partnered with." As if confirming this assessment, Spirit nickered softly, then trotted a short distance away before looking back expectantly at Eli. "He wants to show me something." the boy said with certainty. Can I go with him, just for a little while? Maya hesitated, then nodded. The events of the past days had proven that her son's path would not follow ordinary patterns. Better to embrace that truth than fight against it. Eli mounted Spirit with practiced ease, settling on the Mustang's back, as if he had been riding all his life. We won't go far, he promised. Just to the next ridge. Itganarman, Maya watched as they cantered away, the boy and the horse moving as a single unit in the moonlight. At the top of the ridge, they paused, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. In that moment, Maya saw not just her son in a remarkable horse, but the continuation of something ancient and necessary, a partnership between species, between worlds, between ways of knowing that modern society had largely forgotten. The desert remembers, she thought, understanding at last what Daniel had tried to explain to her years ago. And now, through Eli and Spirit, perhaps humanity might remember too, before the great thirst claimed them all. As if hearing her thoughts, Eli waved from the ridgetop, a small figure, astride a magnificent horse poised between earth and sky, between past and future. Then horse and rider turned, disappearing momentarily beyond the ridge, before reappearing on a lower slope, heading back toward the Nightwater Kiva. Coming home, Maya realized, but also in a deeper sense already home in this ancient landscape, in this circle of unlikely allies, in this newfound purpose that bridged science and spirit, modern necessity, and ancient wisdom. The desert wind carried the sound of Spirit's hoofbeats, a rhythm as old as the land itself. And in that rhythm, those who listened closely might hear the promise of rain, of renewal of waters, flowing once more through channels long dry but never forgotten. The desert remembers. And now so would they all. The desert remembers what humans forget. Beneath its harsh exterior, life persists. Water flows through hidden channels, plants root in impossible crevices, animals survive against overwhelming odds. Just as Eli's gift flourished beneath the pain of his condition, Spirit still runs with the wild herds, sometimes a dark silhouette against dawn-painted mesas. But he always returns, drawn by a bond formed in the crucible of survival and strengthened by something older than either horse or boy can understand. Maya watches her son grow, scientist and mother in equal measure, marveling at how suffering can transform into purpose. Victor carries his redemption quietly, the scars of his betrayal healing slowly, like the desert after rare rain. Perhaps we all have hidden gifts waiting to be awakened. Perhaps we all need guardians to help us find our way when we're lost. And perhaps the earth itself calls to those who can still listen, asking for healing as it has healed us. What whispers might you hear if you stop to listen? What ancient wisdom flows beneath the surface of your own life, waiting to be discovered? The desert knows, the water remembers, and somewhere a boy with fire on his skin and water in his veins rides beside his guardian, between worlds, showing us a path back to balance. If only we have the courage to follow.